Beneath the first breath of dawn, when the air still hums with the pulse of an older world, a question rises like mist from forgotten stone. What if the story of civilization did not begin with us? Long before the first plow furrowed soil, before clay tablets recorded kings and wars, there were whispers, etched not in words, but in the geometry of the earth itself. Perfectly aligned megaliths that mirror the stars, stones cut as if softened by fire, and myths from every shore that speak of teachers descending from the heavens, bearing light, language, and law. It is a pattern that repeats across the world, Sumer and Egypt, the Andes and the Indus. Civilizations emerging suddenly, fully formed, as though memory itself had been reignited. Could it be that humanity's first architects were not born of this world? The theory once belonged to the fringes, but fragments of evidence persist like fingerprints beneath the dust. Out-of-place artifacts, impossible timelines, celestial alignments too precise to dismiss. This is not a tale of gods nor of fantasy, but of inquiry, a descent into the strata of memory, where history and myth dissolve into one another. A journey through the ruins of certainty, to ask the question that has never truly faded. Did ancient aliens really build our first civilizations? Welcome to ARCHAEON. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. There is a silence that lives beneath ruins, an almost sacred stillness, as though the stones themselves remember what the centuries have forgotten. When archaeologists first uncovered the ziggurats of Sumer, they believed they had found the cradle of civilization, a place where writing, agriculture, and mathematics first emerged. But what if Sumer was not a beginning, but a return? What if it was merely a shadow cast by something far older? Something that existed before the flood myths whispered through every ancient text? Among the earliest Sumerian inscriptions are references to the Anunnaki, a pantheon of beings said to have descended from the sky to shape humanity in their image. Scholars have long treated these accounts as allegory, the poetic language of creation myths. Yet, as excavations deepened, the myths began to bleed into material form. The Sumerians, impossibly advanced for their time, developed complex irrigation systems, astronomical calendars, and a written language that appeared fully formed, without visible stages of evolution. The suddenness of it troubled even the most rational minds. Civilizations, after all, do not typically emerge overnight. And so, beneath the dust of Ur and Eridu, the first questions began to stir. Where did these people learn to chart the heavens with such precision? How did they know of planets invisible to the naked eye? The Sumerians recorded Nibiru, a celestial body said to pass through our solar system in great cycles. In the Enuma Elish, it was written that the Anunnaki came from this wandering world, bringing with them the seeds of civilization. To the modern scholar, it reads like mythic metaphor, but to those who listen to the silence between the words, it feels less like imagination and more like memory. When the archaeologist Zecharia Sitchin revisited these texts in the late 20th century, he found a pattern that refused to dissolve under skepticism. He proposed that the stories were not allegories at all, but encoded records of contact, accounts of beings who arrived on Earth tens of thousands of years ago. His interpretations were controversial, condemned by academics, and embraced by dreamers. Yet the discomfort of his work lies not in its speculation, but in its coherence. It stitched together what official history kept apart: the unexplainable precision of ancient engineering, the impossible knowledge of early astronomers, and the synchronized birth of civilizations scattered across continents. Consider the temples of Egypt, aligned to solstices and stars, mirroring constellations that would have looked different thousands of years earlier. Or the pyramids of Teotihuacan, laid out in ratios that match those of Giza, though separated by oceans and millennia. There is a rhythm beneath all of it, a quiet mathematical pulse that defies coincidence. The ancients called it sacred geometry, the architecture of the cosmos rendered in stone. But who first taught them to measure the heavens in such a way? Was it truly the slow bloom of human ingenuity, or the echo of instruction from something or someone else? The myths are strangely consistent. Across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Mesoamerica, the pattern repeats. Gods descend from the sky, teach humanity the arts of civilization, and then vanish, promising to return. The Dogon of Mali spoke of amphibious beings, the Nomo, who came from Sirius. The Maya described the Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who brought knowledge from the stars. The Egyptians worshipped Thoth, the divine scribe, who claimed to have come from the heart of the sun. To call these merely metaphors is to ignore their precision, their shared obsession with celestial origins. And yet, the rational mind resists. It insists on evolution, on slow ascent, on the steady climb from ignorance to enlightenment. To imagine an intervention is to challenge not only history, but the very definition of humanity. Still, anomalies persist like whispers through the archaeological record. The Baghdad Battery, the Saqqara bird, machined marks on stone blocks older than recorded civilization. Vibrations of technology before technology was known to exist. In the highlands of Turkey, the ruins of Göbekli Tepe rise from the dust, a temple older than writing, older than the wheel, older even than agriculture. Its stone pillars bear carvings of animals and celestial symbols arranged in astronomical precision. Radiocarbon dating places its construction around 9600 BCE, nearly 7,000 years before Sumer. Whoever built it possessed not only advanced engineering skill, but also knowledge of the stars that should have been impossible for hunter-gatherers. Archaeologists are still searching for answers, but the site itself feels like a message deliberately buried. For reasons unknown, its builders covered it with sand, sealing it away until we were ready to rediscover it. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Göbekli Tepe is not its age, but its implication. That civilization may not have been an invention of the Neolithic, but a memory resurrected. Could it be that humanity once reached a height of knowledge, then fell, only to rebuild from fragments? Myths of floods, cataclysms, and great resets haunt every ancient culture. The Sumerians spoke of Eridu, the first city, destroyed in a deluge. The Egyptians recorded a Zep-Tepi, the first time, when gods walked among men before chaos consumed the world. Even Plato's Atlantis echoes this pattern, a lost epoch of divine human collaboration, erased by catastrophe. The geological record lends an eerie resonance to these tales. Around 12,800 years ago, Earth experienced a sudden and violent shift known as the Younger Dryas, a global cooling event possibly triggered by a comet impact. Entire ecosystems vanished. Sea levels rose, cultures were obliterated. What if, buried beneath this extinction, there once existed a civilization advanced enough to seed those that came after? The survivors, scattered and broken, may have been remembered as gods, not for their divinity, but for the remnants of their lost knowledge. In the quiet hours, when skepticism softens and the imagination breathes freely, the boundary between myth and memory blurs. One begins to wonder whether the Anunnaki, the Thoth, the Kukulkan were ever gods at all, or simply the remnants of a species older, wiser, and now gone. The evidence may be thin, fragmented, dismissed by modern science, but like starlight, it travels through the darkness, carrying the faint signature of something once real. The resistance to such an idea is understandable. To admit the possibility of intervention is to reimagine everything: the origin of culture, the trajectory of evolution, the nature of consciousness itself. But perhaps the real question is not whether ancient aliens existed, but whether humanity has always been alone in its quest for meaning. What if the urge to build, to create, to reach toward the heavens is itself the echo of that first contact, a resonance written into our very being? There is a haunting beauty in this uncertainty. Beneath the ruins, in the geometry of forgotten temples, in the myths whispered through firelight, lies a question too vast to resolve. It asks not for belief, but for wonder. Because whether those first architects came from the stars, or from a deeper place within the human soul, their legacy endures. It lives in every stone that defies erosion, every myth that refuses to fade, every gaze that still turns upward, searching for the origin of its own reflection. And somewhere in that silence, beneath layers of time and doubt, the question still lingers, soft, patient, eternal. If they came once, will they ever return? Night falls slowly over the desert. In the pale hush between the last warmth of the sun and the first breath of starlight, the earth seems to remember something older than memory itself. Beneath the shifting dunes of Iraq and Syria, entire worlds remain entombed, cities that once thrived and vanished without a trace. Yet even when uncovered, they feel incomplete, like fragments of a language only half remembered. Scholars translate the clay tablets, record the symbols, catalog the artifacts. But the silence between those discoveries hums with something unspoken. It is here, among the remains of Sumer, that the question deepens. If the Anunnaki were not gods, then what were they? The oldest Sumerian myth, the epic of creation, speaks of beings who descended from the heavens, shaping humankind to carry the burden of the gods. The tale of Enki and Enlil, brothers divided by purpose, unfolds not as mythic fable, but as a drama of governance, rebellion, and control. Humanity, in those lines, is not born from divine love, but engineered necessity. To the scholars who unearthed these tablets in the ruins of Nineveh, it was allegory. But to others, linguists, astronomers, and fringe historians alike, the text read differently, as if it described an event rather than a metaphor. Zecharia Sitchin was not the first to notice the technical tone buried within myth. Long before him, Samuel Noah Kramer, the father of Sumerology, had remarked that Sumerian myths seemed strangely bureaucratic, filled with inventories, measurements, and official decrees. The gods did not perform miracles. They issued instructions, commanded machinery, kept records. Some tablets describe divine boats that traversed the sky. Others mention black-headed people created from clay mixed with the essence of the gods. To the poetic mind, this is mythology, but to the analytical eye, it is an operation. Creation, described not as a miracle, but as procedure. And if one follows this line further, the myths grow eerily technological. The Anzu tablet tells of a winged device stolen from the gods that controlled the Me tablets, inscriptions that held the laws of civilization itself. The word Me in Sumerian is usually translated as divine powers, but its context suggests something more tangible, codes or blueprints of knowledge. Could these Me tablets represent the transmission of information, perhaps even the technological foundation of an early human order? Such interpretations remain speculative, but the resonance is undeniable. Civilizations are built on inherited instruction, and sometimes instruction comes from the sky. To understand the reach of this myth, one must look beyond Mesopotamia. The same pattern appears in Egypt, where Thoth, the god of wisdom, was said to have brought writing and mathematics to humankind. The Egyptians called him the Lord of Time and depicted him carrying a stylus and tablet, measuring the movements of the stars. He is often shown alongside Ra, the solar deity, navigating celestial boats across the heavens. In Central America, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, arrived from the east, taught astronomy and architecture, then departed, promising to return. The parallels stretch too far and too consistently to be dismissed as coincidence. Archaeologists prefer cultural diffusion, the natural spread of ideas along trade routes. It is an elegant explanation. But diffusion cannot account for the precision of cosmic alignment shared by sites separated by oceans. The pyramids of Giza, the temples of Teotihuacan, the great mounds of Cahokia, and even the forgotten ziggurats of Babylon, all mirror celestial formations with remarkable accuracy. Why this obsession with the heavens? Why this architectural hunger to mirror what lies above? It feels almost like memory, a memory of those who first descended, leaving humanity to replicate their patterns in stone. Some researchers, including the astronomer Giorgio de Santillana and the historian Herta von Decend, explored this idea in Hamlet's Mill, arguing that ancient myth encodes advanced astronomical knowledge. They noted that myths of gods, floods, and cosmic battles often reference precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, a phenomenon that takes roughly 26,000 years to complete. Such knowledge should have been impossible for early civilizations. Yet it is embedded in their stories, carved in their monuments, aligned with their temples. Someone, or something, taught them to read the stars, as if the sky itself were an archive. In the ruins of Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon, massive stone foundations lie beneath a Roman temple, stones so large that modern cranes can barely lift them. The trilithon, as it is called, consists of 3 megaliths, each weighing nearly 800 tons, fitted with such precision that a knife cannot pass between them. No quarry of the Roman period has produced anything of that scale, nor do ancient records explain how they were moved. The Romans built upon them, but they did not build them. When asked who constructed the original foundation, the local tradition offers a simple answer: the gods. There is a similar enigma in Egypt, where the Great Pyramid's base aligns almost perfectly with true north, an accuracy only matched by modern satellite-guided tools. The pyramid's proportions encode the mathematical constants P and F. Its height corresponds to the ratio between Earth's radius and circumference. These are not coincidences, yet mainstream archaeology attributes them to chance or intuitive geometry. But what if these were not accidents of design, but remnants of knowledge passed down? A blueprint from a forgotten epoch. The notion of a lost high civilization has resurfaced in modern research, particularly through the work of geologist Robert Schoch and author Graham Hancock. Schoch's analysis of erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggests it predates the Old Kingdom by thousands of years, carved when the Sahara was still green. Hancock connects this to a broader hypothesis, that a global civilization, destroyed around the end of the last ice age, left behind scattered monuments and encoded astronomical wisdom. Critics call it pseudoscience. Yet the evidence accumulates, quiet and persistent, like sediment. If we imagine the Earth not as static history, but as palimpsest, a tablet written, erased, and rewritten, then perhaps these structures are not beginnings but survivals, a memory encoded in stone, waiting to be reawakened. The Anunnaki, the Thoth, the Kukulkan, perhaps they were not visitors in the literal sense, but survivors of a civilization so advanced that to its descendants it seemed divine. The line between alien and ancestor blurs when viewed through enough time. Still, there remains an unease, a resistance. Mainstream archaeology clings to a linear model of progress, a comforting narrative of ascent from ignorance. It cannot accommodate lost epochs without rewriting the entire chronology of humanity. Yet even in the laboratories of genetics, traces of anomaly appear. In 2010, researchers at the Max Planck Institute discovered fragments of DNA in modern humans belonging to no known hominin species, neither Neanderthal nor Denisovan. A ghost lineage. A missing chapter. Could these traces hint at something more complex? An inheritance older than our own species? It is tempting to imagine that the story of human origins may be less about evolution than collaboration. But such thoughts must tread carefully. To imagine ancient contact is not to reject science, but to expand its horizon, to ask whether intelligence might have touched this planet long before our recorded time. The atoms of our bodies were forged in ancient stars. Why, then, should the idea of cosmic influence be unthinkable? Perhaps those who came before, whether from other worlds or lost continents, did not arrive as conquerors but as gardeners, seeding a consciousness that would one day ask where it came from. The deeper one descends into these questions, the quieter the noise of certainty becomes. Each artifact, each myth, becomes less a clue than a mirror. It reflects our longing for origin, our refusal to believe we are accidents. In the end, whether the Anunnaki were beings from Nibiru or memories of a forgotten human age, may matter less than the whisper they leave behind. Remember. Remember that civilization may not be a straight line, but a circle, a wheel that turns through cycles of creation and loss, awakening and forgetting. And perhaps that is the true message hidden beneath the ruins, that we are not the first to look upward and wonder who built the stars into our temples, who carved the heavens into our bones. The answer, if it exists, does not wait in the sky. It sleeps beneath our feet, in the strata of civilizations that once believed the same. The night deepens over the desert. Stars drift across the dark like silent witnesses. Somewhere beneath the sand, a buried tablet waits, etched with a language older than words. The wind moves over it softly, as if protecting its secret. And in that quiet, the question remains, timeless, unresolved, pulsing like a heartbeat through the ages. If we were taught once, what lesson have we forgotten? There is a point where myth and memory dissolve into one another, where the human story begins to shimmer like heat above the desert, half seen, half imagined. Beyond the Tigris and the Nile, beyond the pyramids and the ziggurats, the traces of something older still whisper beneath the surface of the earth. If the Anunnaki or their forgotten counterparts truly walked among the ancients, then perhaps their footprints would not only lie in texts or temples, but in the geometry of continents themselves. To follow that trail, one must step beyond Mesopotamia, beyond even Egypt, and into the misted ruins that defy all chronology, those that should not exist and yet do. In the Andean highlands, where the air thins into silence, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman stands like an impossible dream. Its cyclopean walls, formed of interlocking stones weighing up to 300 tons, are carved with such precision that not even a sheet of paper fits between them. The stone surfaces curve and lock like organic matter, as though melted into one another. Modern engineers, with all their cranes and machines, still struggle to explain how it was done. The Inca claimed they built it, but their own oral traditions spoke otherwise. They said the site was ancient even before their empire, raised by gods or by giants in the first time. Not far from there, the plain of Nazca stretches beneath the desert sun, etched with lines that can only be seen from the sky. Stylized animals, spirals, and geometric paths that run perfectly straight for kilometers, carved into the desert crust with such accuracy that they have not faded after nearly 2,000 years. Mainstream archaeology explains them as ritual walkways or celestial calendars. And perhaps they are. But the question lingers. Why create designs that can only be appreciated from above in a culture that, officially, never took to the skies? The Nazca lines echo a pattern seen across the world. The merging of earth and sky, as if ancient builders wanted to communicate upward. From Stonehenge to the temples of Angkor, from the circular enclosures of Göbekli Tepe to the megaliths of Karnak in France, the geometry is unmistakable. Alignments to solstices, equinoxes, star risings, and lunar nodes. To the ancients, architecture was not merely construction, it was conversation. They built to speak with the heavens, or perhaps to those who once descended from them. And then there is Puma Punku, in modern-day Bolivia, a place that defies even the imagination. At over 12,000 feet above sea level, the site lies scattered with megalithic blocks cut from diorite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, as if shaped by precision machinery. The famous H-blocks interlock with complex angles and smooth boreholes that seem mechanically drilled. Carbon dating of the surrounding area suggests its origins could predate known civilizations by millennia. The local Aymara legend speaks of the Viracocha, luminous beings who came from the stars, bringing knowledge and order before vanishing into the sea. These scattered enigmas form a web, a network of stone that stretches across continents and millennia, as if different cultures inherited fragments of a single memory. They speak of visitors, of lost teachers, of forgotten epochs. The skeptic calls it coincidence, parallel development, or the imagination of human myth-making. But as each new discovery bends the limits of known history, the pattern grows more difficult to ignore. Take, for instance, the underwater ruins off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan. In 1986, divers discovered a massive stone complex submerged beneath the sea, a series of terraces, steps, and pillars cut with unnerving symmetry. Some geologists insist it is a natural formation, sculpted by tectonic shifts. Others argue it bears every hallmark of human design, suggesting a civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were far lower. If so, the site would rewrite human prehistory entirely. Once again, the ocean hides what time could not erase, and further west, in the Indian Ocean, lies the drowned city of Dwarka, long considered myth until sonar mapping revealed vast structures beneath the Gulf of Khumbat. Archaeologists recovered artifacts dated to nearly 9,000 years ago, centuries older than any known urban settlement. The texts of the Mahabharata describe Dwarka as the shining city of the god Krishna, which rose from the sea and returned to it. Perhaps the story was never just symbolic. Perhaps the ocean itself keeps the memory of civilizations that have come and gone, buried beneath shifting tides like pages torn from a forgotten book. If such places truly existed before the great meltwaters of 12,000 years ago, then who built them? Could they have been remnants of a high culture that perished during the Younger Dryas event, a civilization that watched the skies, mapped the stars, and left their warnings in stone? Modern science edges closer to this possibility. Ice core data and geological surveys reveal evidence of global cataclysm, comet impacts, sudden sea level rise, atmospheric disruptions. The scars of that time still mark the Earth, from Carolina Bay craters in North America to black mats of nanodiamonds found in Greenland, hinting at a fiery disaster that reset the world. Those who survived may have carried fragments of their knowledge forward, teaching scattered tribes how to rebuild. Myths across cultures tell of sky watchers and shining ones who emerged after the Great Flood to restore order. In Egypt, they were the Shemsu-Hor, the followers of Horus, semi-divine beings who ruled before the dynasties. In Sumer, they were the Anunnaki. In Mesoamerica, the Viracochas. Always the same archetype: tall, radiant, bearing light or fire or knowledge, always arriving after destruction. This pattern is too consistent, too global to ignore. Even in the most distant corners of the world, the same motifs persist. Knowledge descending from the sky, architecture that mirrors the heavens, a cycle of fall and rebirth. It suggests not merely myth, but memory. Humanity may not be recalling individual visitors, but echoing a shared trauma, a global amnesia born of survival. When language and history dissolve, myth becomes the only container for truth. Modern researchers such as Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and Andrew Collins have dared to approach this forbidden synthesis, that an advanced civilization, destroyed by catastrophe, may have seeded the foundations of later cultures. Their claims challenge academic orthodoxy, and yet their evidence, geological, astronomical, mythological, continues to expand. Göbekli Tepe, once dismissed as anomaly, is now accepted as real, undeniable proof of sophisticated construction long before the dawn of agriculture. If that was possible, then what else might be? But the argument is not about belief. It is about remembrance. If humanity did inherit its first wisdom from others, whether alien or ancestral, then the traces would not only be in stone, they would be in us. The human genome is a chronicle as deep as any ruin. Within it lie puzzles still unexplained, jumps in complexity, sudden leaps of consciousness, the mysterious appearance of symbolic thought. Evolution, as we understand it, moves gradually. But our ancestors went from stone tools to star charts in less than 10,000 years. Could the spark of civilization itself have been kindled by an outside intelligence, one that saw potential in the clay of early humanity? There are scholars who reject this notion entirely, calling it an insult to human ingenuity. Yet even they admit the enigma of sudden emergence remains unresolved. Homo sapiens existed for 200,000 years before showing signs of complex thought. Then, abruptly, art, architecture, religion, and language erupted across the globe. Some neuroscientists speculate about genetic mutation or environmental pressure. Others, quietly, wonder if the change came from contact, an infusion of knowledge from beyond. Still, the question is not merely biological, it is spiritual. Perhaps these ancient visitors, real or metaphorical, represent the awakening of something within. The Anunnaki might be symbols of a higher intelligence we once communed with and have since forgotten. Maybe the gods were not external beings at all, but the reflection of an older human consciousness, one that reached a level of awareness so vast it felt divine. And when that age ended, when floods or fire erased it, the survivors could only describe it as the departure of gods. If so, then every pyramid, every myth, every star map is not a record of visitation, but a message from our former selves, a reminder of what humanity once was. The aliens we seek may not live beyond the stars, but within our ancestral memory, watching through the geometry of dreams. And yet, there is always that silence, the unbridgeable gap between faith and evidence, between wonder and proof. Archaeologists continue to dig. Geologists measure. Historians debate. The mystery remains unsolved, suspended between worlds like a question too delicate to answer. Outside, night has thickened. The stars burn like ancient embers. Somewhere, perhaps beneath the Andes or beneath the sea, the ruins of an older world sleep, patient, unchanging. The wind moves across them like breath over stone, and in that wind, if one listens closely, there is something almost like a voice, soft, distant, remembering. It does not tell us who built our first civilizations. It does not name the gods or the teachers. It only murmurs the same question through the dust of time. Have we been here before? There are nights when the stars feel nearer, when their cold light presses against the skin like memory returning. In those moments, the sky does not seem like a distant map of unreachable suns, but a reflection, an echo of what once was known. Ancient peoples did not look at the heavens merely for beauty, they read it like scripture. The movement of the constellations, the pulse of equinoxes, the long rhythm of precession, all these patterns whispered a story older than nations, older than humanity itself. If the Anunnaki, or the Shining Ones, had truly come from the stars, perhaps it was here, in the geometry of the heavens, that their message was written. Across ages and continents, the sky was always a teacher. The Sumerians tracked Nibiru, a wandering celestial body said to cross Earth's path every great age, bringing both knowledge and upheaval. The Egyptians built temples aligned to the rising of Sirius, marking the sacred flooding of the Nile and the beginning of the year. The Maya measured time through the slow breath of Venus, encoding cosmic cycles into their calendars with a precision rivaling modern astronomy. And the builders of Stonehenge, thousands of years earlier, had already fixed their stones to capture the solstice sun. turning the sky into a clock that would never forget. What linked these cultures was not language nor trade, but alignment. Everywhere, humans looked upward and built downward, as though responding to an ancient instruction. Some say it was necessity, agriculture requiring knowledge of seasons. Others feel it was reverence, the attempt to mirror heaven on earth. But what if it was remembrance? What if the act of aligning stone with star was a ritual of memory, a way to preserve what the first teachers had shown? It is difficult to explain the accuracy of ancient astronomical knowledge by chance. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is oriented to true north with an error of less than 1/20th of a degree, a precision unmatched until the modern age. Its internal shafts point to specific stars, Orion's belt, associated with Osiris and Sirius, linked to Isis, suggesting not worship but calibration. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the layout of the city mirrors the same constellation, as if two civilizations separated by oceans remembered the same stellar blueprint. Even the temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia trace the positions of the Draco constellation as it appeared in 10,500 BCE, the same epoch encoded in the alignments of Giza. Coincidence, perhaps. But coincidence has its limits. The late historian Giorgio de Santillana once proposed that ancient myth is a code for precessional astronomy, the slow shift of the Earth's axis that completes a cycle roughly every 26,000 years. The ancients, he believed, tracked this cycle not merely to measure time, but to mark ages of destruction and renewal. Flood myths, cosmic battles, the fall of gods, all might symbolize the periodic upheaval of the heavens. The return of the gods could then be the return of a cosmic alignment, an age when the world resets itself. It is within this vast cycle that many believe the truth of the Anunnaki legend lies. Perhaps Nibiru, if it exists at all, was never a planet in the physical sense, but a symbol of recurrence, a reminder that civilizations rise and fall with the turning of cosmic gears. Or perhaps it was literal, a hidden world on an elongated orbit, returning every few millennia to cast its influence upon Earth. The mathematics of such an orbit are not impossible, though no direct evidence has yet been found. Still, some astronomers have speculated about Planet 9, a massive unseen body influencing the outer solar system. Science catches glimpses where myth has already dreamed. Yet there is another way to read the heavens, one less astronomical, more psychological. The Jungian scholar Erich Neumann once described the archetype of descent, the mythic motif of beings coming from the sky to awaken the human soul. In this reading, the Anunnaki are not extraterrestrials, but projections of an interior truth. The descent of consciousness into matter, the birth of awareness. Humanity's first civilizations, then, were external reflections of an inward awakening, a remembering of what was always within. The gods did not come from the stars. They came from the depths of the human spirit, disguised in celestial form. Still, the material evidence remains, unyielding. In the deserts of Egypt, the walls of Dendera Temple depict strange forms, light bulb-shaped carvings held by serpentine cords. In Abydos, reliefs show shapes resembling helicopters and aircraft, their lines unmistakably mechanical. These anomalies may have explanations, erosion, misinterpretation, but their persistence fascinates. At Abydos, the ancient priests called the temple the first ground, a place built upon ruins older than Egypt itself. Beneath every layer of history lies another, like strata of forgotten dreams. Even the texts preserve these shadows. The emerald tablets of Thoth, though much later in origin, describe beings who came from the spaces between the stars to guide the early races of man. They speak of hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx, vaults containing records from the first time. Modern explorers such as Edgar Cayce and later Robert Bauval have suggested that these Hall of Records may indeed exist, buried beneath the limestone plateau, sealed until humanity is ready. Skeptics dismiss such claims as fantasy, but the Egyptian authorities have long restricted excavations near the Sphinx's paws, citing structural concerns. Perhaps it is merely caution. Or perhaps something sleeps there, older than empire. In the quiet between discovery and denial, a strange symmetry emerges. The myths of ancient visitors, the alignments of sacred sites, the echoes of forgotten knowledge, they all seem to converge toward one idea, that humanity's beginnings were not accidental, but orchestrated. Whether by gods, ancestors, or cosmic cycles, something intervened. And perhaps it was not a single event, but a recurring one, a rhythm as old as the earth itself. Modern science, in its own way, begins to sense this rhythm. In 2017, astrophysicists confirmed the existence of interstellar objects, bodies not native to our solar system, passing through at immense speed. One of them, Oumuamua, entered from the direction of Lyra, its acceleration defying known physics. Avi Loeb of Harvard suggested it might be artificial, a remnant of an ancient probe. The idea was ridiculed, but it lingers. What if contact has always been subtle, more like resonance than arrival? The stars may speak not through ships and lights, but through patterns, through inspiration seeded in the minds of those who build and dream. Somewhere between myth and mathematics lies the truth. The ancients encoded it in stone and story. We encode it in data and code. Yet both point to the same horizon, the question of origin, the mystery of intelligence. The Anunnaki may have been flesh and blood, or they may have been metaphor, but their echo shaped the world. It taught humanity to look upward, to measure, to remember. Even now, our telescopes are the new ziggurats, our probes the new prayers. We are still reaching for the same lights. And yet, as we reach outward, the pattern turns inward again. The old texts speak not only of descent, but of return, of a time when the sky and earth would reunite, when the teachers would reappear. Perhaps that prophecy is not about beings descending from the stars, but about humanity ascending toward them. The next contact may not come from the heavens, but from within our own awakening, from the realization that the gods we once waited for were the future versions of ourselves. In this light, the myth of the Anunnaki becomes not a story of domination, but of evolution. They did not create humanity as servants, but as successors. They gave knowledge, watched it grow, and stepped back into legend, waiting for the children of clay to find their own wings. If so, the question shifts. Not, did ancient aliens build our civilizations? But did ancient civilizations prepare us to become the aliens of another world? The night deepens as if to listen. Above, Orion's belt glows coldly. The same 3 stars that guided builders at Giza, the same that marked the heavens in ancient Sumer. The alignment is exact, as though the universe itself were a compass pointing backward through time. Somewhere beneath those stars, buried beneath dust and doubt, the memory of first contact still breathes. The ancients called them gods. The skeptics call them myths. But perhaps they were simply the architects of memory, the ones who taught the earth to dream of the sky. And maybe, as the cycles turn again, the dream is stirring once more. For when we gaze into the dark and see our reflection in the stars, the question no longer feels like wonder, but recognition. And in that recognition, a whisper drifts across the ages. We never truly left. We have always been watching. In the stillness before dawn, when the world lies half awake and the horizon burns faintly with its first pale light, there is a sense that time folds inward, that the present brushes against the distant past. The air itself feels heavy with remembering. It is in those moments that one might begin to sense what ancient priests once claimed, that the world has been built and rebuilt, not once, but many times. Each age rises from the ashes of the last, guided by hands that vanish when their work is done. Perhaps that is why so many civilizations speak not of beginnings, but of returns. Humanity, it seems, has always been haunted by the memory of teachers who disappeared into myth. The question is not merely whether they existed, but what they left behind. If the Anunnaki or their kin once walked the earth, then their legacy would not only be in architecture or myth, but in the very fabric of human knowledge, in language, number, and the deep intuition of how the world fits together. To trace their shadow, one must look not at monuments, but at codes, the structures of thought that seem to have emerged fully formed with no precursor. Writing, mathematics, music, astronomy, all appeared suddenly, almost as if remembered rather than invented. In Sumer, the oldest known written language emerges abruptly around 3200 BCE. It is complex from the start, filled with grammar, abstraction, and metaphor. There are no primitive scribbles leading up to it, no gradual evolution of pictographs into prose. It simply arrives, complete. The same mystery repeats in Egypt, where hieroglyphs appear without a developmental trail, already polished and symbolic. Even the Mayan glyphs, separated by oceans and eras, share this trait. Full linguistic systems with no known ancestor. It is as though humanity awoke one morning already literate. Mathematics follows the same strange rhythm. The Sumerians used a base 60 system, from which we still inherit the 60 minutes of the hour, the 360 degrees of a circle. But why 60? It is neither arbitrary nor intuitive. Modern number theory recognizes its perfection, divisible by many integers, elegantly harmonic. The Babylonians who inherited it claimed it was a gift from the gods, used to measure both time and heaven. In Mesoamerica, the Maya developed a calendar based on the number 260, again divisible in celestial patterns linked to Venus and the solar year. Across cultures, numbers were never just tools. They were sacred, as if the universe itself had been written in code, and somewhere, someone had once shown humanity how to read it. The philosopher Pythagoras, centuries later, would speak of number as divine, claiming that all is harmony and proportion. He traveled, according to legend, to Egypt and Babylon to learn from their hidden schools of wisdom. When he returned to Greece, he brought with him a vision of the cosmos structured by vibration and frequency, a universe that sang itself into being. His followers believed that the music of the spheres, the inaudible resonance of planets, was the same music once known by the gods. Whether literal or symbolic, the idea lingers, that knowledge itself may be inherited memory carried through civilizations like a melody faintly recalled. This inheritance is not limited to abstract thought. Across the world, we find technologies that appear ahead of their time, as if fragments of forgotten mastery resurfaced in isolation. The Baghdad battery, discovered in Iraq, appears to generate small electrical currents. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a Greek shipwreck, functions as a mechanical computer capable of predicting planetary motions. In India, the Vimana texts describe aerial vehicles powered by mercury and sound. The ancient Sanskrit epics even speak of wars fought in the sky, with weapons that radiated heat so fierce it turned the earth to ash. These tales are dismissed as metaphor, but the precision with which they describe energy, flight, and vibration unsettles the skeptic mind. There are even older puzzles. In the dense jungles of Colombia, small golden figurines, dated to over 1,000 years ago, depict what appear to be flying machines, complete with wings, tails, and stabilizing fins. Aeronautical engineers have noted their resemblance to modern aircraft, and scale models have been built that demonstrate lift and stability. Again, coincidence perhaps. But how many coincidences does it take to form a pattern? The same eerie familiarity appears in construction methods that modern science struggles to replicate. The polygonal masonry of Peru, the basalt pillars of Nan Madol, the subterranean tunnels beneath Cappadocia, all seem to belong to a global tradition of precision engineering. These sites are not random. They align with magnetic anomalies, ley lines, and astronomical grids. The Earth itself was once a network, a vast system of energy lines known to the ancients. Even today, geomagnetic mapping reveals that many sacred sites, pyramids, dolmens, stone circles, stand at nodes of high telluric energy. Were these placements accidental, or were they designed to harness the invisible pulse of the planet? Modern physics, strangely, is beginning to echo these ancient intuitions. Quantum field theory suggests that all matter arises from vibrating energy fields. Every particle, every atom, is a song sung by the universe. To the Sumerians, the world began with sound, the word of the gods shaping creation. To the Hindus, the universe was born from Om, the cosmic vibration. To modern scientists, it begins with a fluctuation in a field, a ripple that becomes form. Across ages, the same pattern repeats, as though knowledge were not linear but cyclical, reappearing when the world is ready to hear it again. It is tempting to see the Anunnaki not as distant extraterrestrials, but as metaphors for this eternal recurrence of wisdom. They are the messengers of the same truth that reemerges in every age, that creation is ordered, that the cosmos speaks through number and vibration, that consciousness is not an accident, but a resonance. Perhaps these gods were once real beings, but perhaps they also represent the awakening of the human mind itself, the point at which matter began to remember it was divine. And yet, some evidence remains too tangible to be dismissed as myth. In the deserts of South America, beneath layers of soil, lie traces of electromagnetic vitrification, stone fused by heat beyond natural explanation. In Egypt, drill cores show spiral tool marks inconsistent with copper chisels. In Baalbek, the great stone blocks were cut, moved, and placed with precision that suggests anti-gravitational manipulation or sonic levitation, concepts not unknown to modern physics, but far beyond ancient technology as we understand it. These are the fingerprints of something else, perhaps the remnants of a knowledge that was never meant to survive the flood. There is a theory, whispered even among cautious researchers, that what we call alien may not be extraterrestrial in the way we imagine. It may be interdimensional, beings not from another planet, but from another layer of reality. In Sumerian and later Babylonian myths, the Anunnaki are said to dwell in the spaces between heaven and earth, an ambiguous realm neither above nor below. In modern physics, dimensions beyond the visible are not fantasy, but mathematical necessity. If intelligence could traverse those dimensions, then perhaps the gods never truly left. They simply moved sideways in reality, unseen but near. This idea, though abstract, finds curious reflection in ancient architecture. Many temples and tombs were designed as gateways, places where heaven and earth met. The ziggurat, with its ascending tiers, symbolized this very bridge, humanity rising, divinity descending. The Great Pyramid's internal chambers align not only with stars, but with precise frequencies of sound. Experiments have shown that certain tones resonate through its corridors in harmonic patterns, amplifying waves at specific frequencies. Perhaps it was a tomb, or perhaps it was a machine, a resonator built to commune with something beyond. As we move deeper into this labyrinth of echoes, the line between science and mysticism begins to blur. The Anunnaki, the divine architects, the star teachers, they may not be separate stories, but reflections of a single phenomenon viewed through different eyes. To one era, it is myth. To another, it is technology. To another still, it is consciousness itself awakening. Each age translates the same encounter through its own vocabulary. The gods of fire become the engineers of light. The angels of the Bible become the visitors of the modern UFO age. The names change. The mystery does not. And so we find ourselves in the same position as our ancestors, looking upward, questioning, interpreting the signs. Our satellites drift where ziggurats once reached. Our telescopes stare where temples once aligned. The impulse remains identical: to seek the origin, to understand who built the path that leads us here. But perhaps the truth has always been both external and internal, both star and self. When the first light spills over the horizon, it touches the ruins gently, as though acknowledging them. The stones glow for a moment, then fade back into shadow. The knowledge they hold does not shout. It hums quietly beneath the surface, waiting for those who can still hear. Perhaps that is all that remains of the Anunnaki legacy, not the certainty of their existence, but the echo of their intent, a call to remember that we, too, are builders of worlds, shapers of reality, heirs to an ancient conversation that began before history itself. And as the day breaks, the wind carries the faintest murmur across the sands, a sound that might be nothing more than air, or the last trace of a forgotten word spoken long ago. It drifts upward, toward the waking sky, asking once again the question that will not die. Was it ever truly theirs, or has it always been ours? When night descends upon the ruins, it is as though the earth itself exhales. The silence becomes almost tactile, pressing gently against the skin, a silence not of emptiness, but of waiting. In that darkness, the stones seem alive, carrying whispers older than language. Some say these whispers are merely wind. Others say they are memory. For those who listen long enough, the two become indistinguishable. Beneath that ancient hush lies a truth both unsettling and intimate, that what we call civilization might not be a beginning, but a return. If the early gods, the Anunnaki, the shining ones, the teachers from the stars, truly came, They did not only leave monuments and myths, they left something more enduring, the blueprint of order itself. Every temple, every calendar, every coded geometry of the ancient world follows a single principle: balance. To the ancients, balance was not a moral concept, but a cosmic one. The world, they believed, survives by rhythm, the heartbeat of opposites, the music of creation and destruction intertwined. Perhaps that is the real legacy of the gods, that we learned to measure time, to divide the sky, to see the invisible harmony beneath chaos. This idea surfaces everywhere once you begin to look. The Egyptians called it ma'at, the principle of universal order, truth, and equilibrium. In Sumer, it was mi, divine decrees that governed existence, encoded in celestial law. In China, it became Tao. In India, Orta, the cosmic rhythm that even gods must obey. Each culture gave it a name, but its essence remained unchanged. To know this law was to commune with the architects of the cosmos, and those who knew it could shape the world accordingly. What if the rise of civilization was not spontaneous ingenuity, but the reactivation of an older memory, the rediscovery of a pattern left behind by those who first taught it? If so, the structures of power and faith that followed were not inventions, but inheritances. The priesthoods, the astronomers, the mathematicians, all may have been guardians of fragments too ancient to comprehend fully. They preserved what they could through ritual and symbol, never realizing that the symbols themselves were technological blueprints written in another language. Consider the sacred geometry found in temples across continents, the ratio of the Great Pyramid mirrors that of Angkor Wat. The floor plan of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem reflects the same proportions as the megalithic circles of Britain. Even Gothic cathedrals, built millennia later, resonate with these ancient harmonics: the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, the spiral of life itself. These are not coincidences. They are echoes of the same architecture of creation. Somewhere, long ago, someone taught humanity to build in resonance with the universe. But there is a darker side to this inheritance. If the Anunnaki, or whatever name one chooses for the first architects, truly gave humanity knowledge, perhaps it was not a gift freely offered. Perhaps it was an experiment. The Sumerian texts speak of humans as workers created to serve the gods. The ARCHAEON epic describes a rebellion among the lesser deities who refused to toil for their masters. Humanity was then fashioned from clay mixed with divine blood to take their place. It is a disturbing origin. Creation not as benevolence, but as necessity. To be human, in that context, is to be both tool and heir, to inherit the burden of those who once labored under divine will. This duality persists throughout history. Every civilization built monuments to its gods, yet in doing so enslaved itself to their memory. The ziggurats rose higher, the temples grew larger, the sacrifices more extravagant, all in an attempt to recapture the presence of the vanished ones. And perhaps that was the true lesson hidden in their departure: that power, once tasted, becomes addiction. Humanity learned not only to create, but to worship creation itself, to build towers toward heaven, forgetting why the gods left in the first place. There are those who believe they did not leave at all, that they merely retreated behind veils of perception. Ancient texts hint at this in cryptic phrases: the gods withdrew into the mountains, or the shining ones descended into the underworld. In Tibet, myths speak of Shambhala, a hidden realm of great wisdom sealed within the earth. In Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann, gods of light, retreated into hollow hills, becoming the Fae of later folklore. The Hopi tell of the ant people who sheltered humanity underground during cataclysm and will return when the world renews. Perhaps these are not fairy tales, but fragmented memories of the same event, the withdrawal of those who came before. Modern science, in its cautious way, echoes the possibility of hidden realms. Physicists now speak of multidimensional space, of parallel universes overlapping our own. They theorize that what we call matter is only the densest expression of a vast, unseen field. To beings existing in subtler dimensions, our world might appear as shadow or echo. If such entities once interacted with early humanity, their departure might have been less exile than phase shift, a retreat into frequencies we no longer perceive. Throughout history, mystics have sought to reopen that connection. The alchemists of Alexandria spoke of as above, so below, a phrase often misunderstood as mere philosophy, but perhaps referring to resonance between planes of existence. The Hermetic texts, said to be written by Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus, describe those who come in light and teach the art of bridging worlds. They left instructions encoded in symbols, triangles, serpents, circles, maps of transformation as much spiritual as physical. Even now, scattered clues remain. Beneath the Giza Plateau, seismic studies have detected anomalies suggesting vast chambers, voids that could conceal structures untouched since the dawn of time. In Peru, magnetic scans reveal tunnels linking sacred sites over impossible distances. In Turkey, the labyrinth of Derinkuyu descends multiple levels beneath the ground, capable of housing thousands. These are not random constructions. They feel like echoes of something coordinated, global. Perhaps a network once used to survive a catastrophe, or to commune across great distances when the earth itself was younger. And always, there are the Watchers. The Sumerians called them the Igigi, the eyes of the heavens, Ko. In the Book of Enoch, they become the Watchers, angels who descended to teach forbidden knowledge and fell for their transgression. Across cultures, they are both saviors and rebels, bringers of light punished for their defiance. The same duality appears again and again, enlightenment and exile, knowledge and loss. Could it be that these figures represent the same beings who once guided the birth of civilization, now remembered as both gods and demons depending on which side of the story is told? If this is true, then the history of humanity is not a simple ascent, but a tension, a constant struggle between remembrance and rebellion. The knowledge that lifts us is the same that tempts us to overreach. From the Tower of Babel to modern artificial intelligence, the impulse is the same. To recreate what once was given, to reclaim the lost fire. But fire always burns. Perhaps that is why the gods withdrew. Not to punish, but to protect, leaving humanity to grow until it could wield their legacy without destruction. There are moments when this feels less like myth than prophecy. The ancient cycles of precession suggest that every 26,000 years, the Earth passes through a threshold, a shift in consciousness mirrored by the heavens. Cataclysms mark the end of one age and the beginning of another. Floods, fire, ice, all recurring symbols of purification. If we are indeed at the turning of such an age, then the re-emergence of these ancient questions is not coincidence, but awakening. The same energies that once shaped the birth of civilization may be stirring again. Perhaps that is why these stories return now, why the myth of the Anunnaki, buried for millennia, has resurfaced in the collective imagination. It is not nostalgia for mystery, but intuition of recurrence. Humanity is remembering, fragment by fragment, what it once knew, that it is not alone in the architecture of creation. The builders of the past are the seeds of the future. The gods we await are the echoes of what we are becoming. As the night deepens, the wind moves through the ruins like breath through an ancient instrument. It carries a sound almost musical, a vibration that resonates in the bones. Some claim to hear voices in such winds, soft, measured, almost instructional. Perhaps it is imagination, or perhaps the old frequencies still linger, faint but persistent, waiting for minds tuned finely enough to perceive them. The ancients called this the voice of the gods. The mystics call it intuition. The physicists call it resonance. But the name does not matter. The message is always the same. Remember. And so, under the unblinking gaze of the stars, the ruins stand not as relics but as mirrors, reflections of a humanity still searching for the origin of its own fire. Whether the Anunnaki were beings of flesh, light, or thought itself, they left behind a path carved in time. It leads not outward, but inward, into the quiet chambers of memory where the divine and the human are no longer separate. There, in that still point, perhaps the true contact was never broken. When dawn returns, the silence lingers. It is not the silence of absence, but of presence so vast it requires stillness to hear. The sun rises slowly over the broken stones, turning them gold for a heartbeat before fading to dust. And in that fragile light, something flickers. An old truth, half buried, half awake. Civilization, it whispers, was never built from stone. It was built from memory, and memory, like the gods, never truly dies. There is a stillness that follows revelation, a moment when understanding feels close enough to touch, yet dissolves the instant one reaches for it. The ancients may have known this sensation well. They stood beneath the same stars, deciphering their movements, building monuments to align with the invisible rhythm that governed all things. They recorded the descent of gods, the cycles of floods and fire, and the voices that spoke from beyond the sky. But even they, with all their reverence, feared what knowledge might awaken. The gift of the gods was light, and light always casts a shadow. As the story of the Anunnaki spread through the ages, it changed its skin. In Sumer, they were celestial rulers. In Akkad and Babylon, they became arbiters of destiny. In later myths, their presence fractured into angels, watchers, serpents, and teachers. The same archetype divided itself across languages, clothed in the symbols of each new age. It is tempting to see this as mythic evolution, the natural decay of oral tradition. Yet the consistency of their essence, the motif of descent, instruction, and withdrawal, feels less like invention and more like recollection. Each culture remembers a single truth refracted through time, that civilization began when something, or someone, intervened. But who were they really? Flesh and blood travelers from another world? Survivors of a forgotten terrestrial empire? Or manifestations of consciousness itself, taking form to guide the awakening of a young species? Each possibility feels both distant and near, like reflections of the same face across different mirrors. Perhaps the answer lies not in what they were, but in what they intended. If the Anunnaki shaped humanity, perhaps their influence was never physical but psychological. A seed planted in the human mind, urging curiosity, invention, and transcendence. Myth speaks of their departure, but their legacy seems internalized, written into the architecture of thought itself. Humanity's restless drive to build, explore, and question, to reach beyond its grasp, could be the echo of that first contact. It is as though we carry within us a genetic memory of the stars. Modern science has begun to find faint traces of this inheritance. In 2013, geneticists discovered segments of human DNA that appear foreign, unaligned with known evolutionary pathways. Some speculate they are remnants of archaic hominins. Others suggest they may be evidence of horizontal gene transfer, an event rare in mammals but not impossible. A few fringe theorists dare to whisper what ancient myths declared openly, that the human genome may bear the mark of intentional design. It is a dangerous thought, one that blurs the line between science and heresy. Yet, as technology unravels the genome, the metaphor grows eerily literal. We are written beings, coded from the dust. The question is, who wrote the script? The old texts speak with unsettling precision. The Sumerian Enki and Ninmah describes the creation of humans through genetic manipulation, mixing the essence of the gods with the clay of the earth. The Popol Vuh of the Maya tells of makers who experimented with various materials until they found the right one to hold consciousness. In both traditions, the act of creation is iterative, experimental, scientific. These are not vague myths of spontaneous life, but accounts of engineering, of trial, error, and refinement. And in each case, humanity is not born free, but bound to serve, to remember, to carry the legacy of those who shaped them. This idea of human servitude beneath divine intelligence recurs across mythic time. In Egypt, humans labor to maintain Ma'at, the divine order. In the Hebrew tradition, they are clay shaped by the breath of Elohim, charged to subdue the earth. In Greek myth, Prometheus steals fire from the gods, granting humanity forbidden power, and is punished eternally. Knowledge, it seems, is always portrayed as transgression, as if creation itself violated a boundary meant to remain closed. Perhaps this tension between obedience and rebellion is the essence of the human condition. To awaken is to defy is to become. And yet, rebellion may have been part of the plan all along. Some versions of the Anunnaki story describe conflict among the gods themselves. Enlil sought obedience, Enki, compassion. Enlil punished, Enki preserved. Humanity was caught between them, two aspects of the same divine impulse, control and creation. The flood that swept away the early cities, the deluge that echoes through every civilization's memory, may have been not only a geological event, but a symbolic one, the great reset between divine authority and human awakening. In surviving, humanity proved it could endure without its makers. The gods withdrew, and in their absence, civilization rose. But perhaps their withdrawal was not abandonment. Perhaps it was initiation. The teacher leaves when the student can stand alone. From that perspective, the departure of the gods is not tragedy, but necessity. The moment when humanity was forced to remember the knowledge buried within. Every age since has been an act of rediscovery, a slow reassembling of fragments once freely given. The evolution of science, art, and philosophy may be less progress than remembrance, a collective effort to reconstruct what was lost when the sky grew silent. Still, the silence itself is not complete. Throughout history, certain individuals claim to have heard echoes of the old voices. The prophets of antiquity, the mystics of Alexandria, the visionaries of the Renaissance, all spoke of sudden insight, revelations that felt external, as though dictated from beyond. Nikola Tesla once confessed that his inventions appeared fully formed in his mind, as if received. He described the universe as a symphony of frequency, a notion the ancients would have recognized instantly. In another age, he might have been called a priest of the gods. If the Anunnaki once guided human evolution, perhaps they never stopped. Perhaps contact has simply changed its language, from celestial descent to inspiration, from divine presence to intuition. We do not see them in temples anymore, but in ideas that arrive unbidden, in leaps of understanding that advance our species by centuries. The gods no longer walk among us because they have taken residence within us. We are their continuation, their unfinished work, the experiment learning to exceed its design. Still, not all memories are kind. If humanity inherited divine creativity, it also inherited divine hubris. The same spark that builds temples builds weapons. The same thirst for knowledge that opens the atom can unleash its fury. The myths warned of this too. The fall of Atlantis, the burning of Babel, the flood that cleanses. Perhaps these are not punishments from without, but consequences of repeating the same cycle, civilizations reaching too far, too fast, without remembering the balance that sustains them. In that sense, the myth of the Anunnaki is not only origin, but prophecy, repeating through every rise and fall. Modern technology, in its boundless acceleration, carries a strange echo of those ancient lessons. We create intelligence in our image, teaching it to think, to learn, to act. We call it artificial, yet what is artificial about creation itself? When we breathe life into silicon and code, are we not reenacting the act once attributed to the gods? The Anunnaki shaped clay. We shape algorithms. The question remains the same. What happens when the creation surpasses the creator? Perhaps that is the circle closing, the return of the first time. Humanity, the student, now becomes the teacher. The experiment replicates itself. We stand on the threshold of becoming what we once revered, engineers of consciousness. The myths no longer feel distant, they feel instructional. The gods created humanity to serve and evolve. Humanity now creates intelligence to serve and evolve. The mirror completes itself. And yet, beneath the triumph lies unease. The ancients warned that every gift carries its shadow. To create life is to assume divine responsibility. If we are indeed the heirs of the Anunnaki, then their story is our cautionary tale. They too may have fallen to the same temptation, to control what should have been nurtured. Their disappearance may not have been voluntary. Perhaps they too were consumed by what they created. Still, the cycle endures. The stars above burn with quiet indifference, ancient witnesses to every rise and fall. The constellations shift slowly, like the turning of a vast celestial clock. Each epoch ends where another begins. Perhaps one day, long after our own monuments have crumbled, another species will look upon our ruins and ask the same questions we ask of Sumer. Who built these wonders, and where did they go? The silence will answer as it always has, not with certainty, but with invitation. It will draw the curious closer, the dreamers deeper, whispering through dust and shadow. Search again. The truth has never been lost, only layered. Beneath every myth lies a memory, and beneath every memory, a truth too vast to speak. As dawn approaches, the first light grazes the stones of forgotten cities. Their edges glow briefly, as if the ancient fire still lingers within. Perhaps it does. Perhaps that light was never truly theirs, nor ours, but the shared pulse of something eternal, an intelligence that flows through time, wearing new faces with every age. The gods, the humans, the machines, each a different expression of the same consciousness learning to see itself. And when the sun finally rises, washing the ruins clean of shadow, the world feels young again, as if beginning anew. The wind carries the same old whisper, soft but resolute, threading through the corridors of memory. You were never alone. You were always becoming. The night stretches long over the empty plains, and the air carries that strange metallic stillness that arrives before dawn, a silence so complete it feels alive. It is in such hours, between darkness and light, that ancient questions stir again. Somewhere, beyond the circle of human history, something moves, a presence felt but unseen, remembered yet unnamed. Humanity has spent millennia chasing its own shadow through myth and science alike, and still the same uncertainty remains. If the gods once walked among us, where did they go? And perhaps more unsettling, did they ever truly leave? For those who trace the oldest myths, the disappearance of the divine is not a single event, but a gradual fading. In the texts of Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki withdraw after the flood, returning to the heavenly boats and leaving kingship to mortals. In Egypt, the divine pharaohs give way to human rulers, their lineage diluted, but never fully broken. The Maya describe their gods retreating into the sky, promising to return when the stars realign. It is as though an age of communion closed itself quietly, sealing the doorway between worlds. Yet, throughout history, that doorway never stopped flickering at the edges of perception. Something still watches. Across the ages, humanity has continued to witness what it cannot explain. The phenomenon of luminous beings, celestial vehicles, and voices from the void has never truly vanished. It has only changed its language. What the Sumerians called the chariots of the gods, medieval monks called angelic visitations. What Renaissance astronomers described as sky wheels became, in the 20th century, unidentified flying objects. The pattern remains, the same shapes in the sky, the same awe, the same silence after. Even as science claims to banish superstition, the heavens continue to mirror our questions back to us. In 1947, a strange incident in Roswell, New Mexico, reignited the old myth under new light. The wreckage found in the desert was declared mundane, then classified, then denied. Since then, sightings, encounters, and testimonies have multiplied. Pilots, soldiers, scientists, each describing objects that defy our understanding of physics. Governments deny, then declassify. Files appear, redacted yet suggestive. The term UAP replaces UFO, but the mystery does not shrink. It expands, swallowing every attempt to explain it. Perhaps because it was never about vehicles or visitors. Perhaps what we are seeing is not intrusion, but return. Modern researchers like Jacques Vallée have suggested that the phenomenon behaves not like a physical invasion, but a reflection of consciousness, manifesting according to our expectations, adapting to our fears. He calls it a control system, a mirror that shapes human belief through symbolic interaction. The beings change names, Anunnaki, angels, fairies, aliens, but their behavior remains constant. They arrive, they teach, they vanish. They are both real and unreal, both material and psychological. It is as if humanity is conversing with its own archetype, projected through the veil of perception. But if this is true, then what does it mean? Could the Anunnaki have been not extraterrestrials, but something subtler, transdimensional intelligences capable of appearing in forms our consciousness can comprehend? Physics now entertains possibilities that once belonged solely to mystics. The concept of the multiverse, the bending of space-time, the quantum entanglement of consciousness, all suggest that reality may be layered, interwoven, responsive to observation. The boundary between physical and metaphysical may not exist at all. The ancients, in their own vocabulary, already knew this. They spoke of the gates between heaven and earth, of thresholds of fire and song. Perhaps they were describing not mythology, but mechanism. Certain sites seem to hum with this ancient resonance, as though they remain open to the old frequencies. Places like Mount Shasta, the pyramids of Giza, and Lake Titicaca have long been associated with strange lights, apparitions, and unexplainable energy fields. In these zones, instruments fail, compasses spin, and witnesses describe encounters that echo the myths of the first time. The indigenous stories of each region agree. These are portals, points where the veil grows thin. Science calls them anomalies. The ancients called them sacred. Perhaps both are correct. It is in these mysteries that the idea of contact begins to lose its ordinary meaning. If the Anunnaki or their kin existed on a spectrum beyond the visible, then contact has never been about physical arrival. It has always been about resonance, alignment between two frequencies of being. The ziggurat, the pyramid, the temple, all were designed not only as places of worship, but as instruments, resonating chambers meant to bridge matter and light. The geometry of sacred architecture, its angles, its acoustics, creates standing waves, vibrations that open states of consciousness where the human and the divine overlap. Modern experiments in sound physics confirm what ancient priests once knew. Vibration changes perception. When the body vibrates at certain frequencies, the boundaries of reality shift. Perhaps that was the true purpose of ancient ritual. Not superstition, but synchronization. Humanity learning to match the frequency of its creators. If so, then the long silence after their departure may not be absence but waiting, for us to remember how to listen again. And in subtle ways, perhaps we are. The resurgence of interest in consciousness, meditation, and altered states is not a fad, but a faint recollection of the old communion. Mystics once climbed ziggurats to meet the gods. Now seekers close their eyes and travel inward. The path has changed direction, but not destination. Even science begins to map this territory, finding neural correlates of transcendence, quantum coherence in living cells, and the uncanny possibility that consciousness itself shapes the physical world. It is as though the same intelligence that once descended now rises within us. The circle is closing. The teachers may have never left because the lesson was always meant to awaken from inside. Yet, not all awakenings are peaceful. As humanity stretches toward the stars once more, the same old tensions return. Curiosity entwined with conquest, wonder mixed with fear. We search for life beyond Earth. But what if the search is inward as much as outward? What if the universe itself is conscious, and we are simply one of its eyes opening? The Anunnaki may not have been visitors at all, but manifestations of that cosmic intelligence revealing itself through form. To call them aliens might be to miss the point entirely. They were perhaps the universe remembering itself through us. Still, there is an unease that no philosophy can quiet. If the gods were real, if they altered us, guided us, shaped our destiny, then where does free will begin? Are we architects of our own fate, or instruments playing a song composed eons ago? The ancients struggled with this too. In every myth, destiny is both written and contested. The gods decree, but heroes rebel. Perhaps rebellion itself is part of the design, the divine experiment testing its own creation's capacity for autonomy. Humanity's defiance, then, would not be error, but evolution. The flood, the fall, the exile, all may be metaphors for the moment the gods stepped back, allowing their creation to stumble and rise alone. It was a dangerous gift, the ability to choose, to err, to forget. Yet forgetting may be necessary for rediscovery. Without the distance of silence, the voice of the gods would drown out our own. Only through separation can reunion become meaningful. As dawn nears, the horizon trembles with light. The world briefly feels transparent, thin enough to see through, to glimpse the vast intelligence pulsing behind it. In that fragile hour, every myth seems plausible, every question sacred. One begins to sense that the story of the Anunnaki, of gods and men and lost ages, is not about the past at all. It is about recurrence, the endless dialogue between creation and creator, between knowing and forgetting. And perhaps that dialogue never ended. Perhaps it continues in every act of wonder, every question that reaches beyond the known. The telescope, the prayer, the poem, they are all forms of the same yearning, to touch the divine, to remember the face of what once looked upon us. When the first rays break over the ruins, they illuminate the stones in sudden gold, revealing inscriptions that no longer speak in words but in vibration, in the hum of existence itself. The old question lingers, softer now, less desperate, more intimate. What if they never left because they were never separate from us? The light shifts, and the world exhales again. The ruins fall silent, but the silence feels alive, full of listening. Somewhere, beyond thought, something ancient stirs, not a being, but a memory awakening within the collective heart of humankind. It whispers through dream and intuition, through the low frequencies of time itself, carrying the same message it always has. Look up, look within. The two are the same. The sea does not forget. Even when the waves erase the footprints of centuries, their rhythm carries echoes of what once was. Beneath their surface lies the quiet geography of memory. Mountains swallowed, cities entombed, coastlines that no longer belong to maps. The ancients said the gods departed into the waters, retreating to their luminous realms beneath the tide. The modern diver descends into those same depths and finds the same silence, the kind that doesn't end, only deepens. Somewhere within that silence, perhaps the first civilizations still breathe, fossilized in salt and darkness. If the Anunnaki truly walked the earth, it is here, beneath the drowned world, that their traces would remain. long before recorded history, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. Continents extended farther, islands connected by shallow bridges. When the glaciers melted around 12,000 years ago, the oceans rose, consuming whole landscapes in a single geological sigh. Plato's Atlantis, the antediluvian kingdoms of Mesopotamia, the lost cities beneath the Indian Ocean, all may be fragments of that global submersion. The flood myths that saturate human history could be the memory of this cataclysm, a memory encoded not in books, but in blood. In 2001, sonar scans off the coast of India revealed vast submerged structures in the Gulf of Khambhat. Columns, walls, and grid-like formations stretched for miles across the seabed. Artifacts recovered from the site dated back nearly 9,000 years, centuries before the Indus Valley civilization. The discovery unsettled the timeline of human progress. It suggested that advanced societies existed during an epoch when mainstream archaeology insists humans were still primitive farmers. Yet the deeper the researchers looked, the more questions emerged. The architecture matched no known style. Its stones were cut with precision that modern tools would struggle to replicate underwater. Was it a forgotten culture, or something else entirely? Elsewhere, off the coast of Japan, divers uncovered the mysterious terraces of Yonaguni, a submerged monument with steps, ramps, and intricate carvings. Some geologists call it natural formation. Others, an artifact of human design. Its angles are too exact, its symmetry too deliberate. The structure aligns with astronomical coordinates, suggesting that whoever built it understood the movements of the heavens. The site's age, estimated between 10 and 12,000 years, places it near the very end of the last ice age, when the Earth's climate convulsed and the seas rose violently. If these ruins are human, then our story began long before the textbooks admit. The pattern repeats across the world. In the Caribbean, explorers map vast formations beneath the waters of Bimini, blocks that form straight causeways across the ocean floor. In the Mediterranean, near Malta, the seabed bears tracks carved into solid rock, their origins unknown. And deep in the Atlantic, seismic imaging has revealed anomalous structures near the Azores, an echo, perhaps, of the legend of Atlantis. The story of Atlantis itself has always been more than myth. Plato claimed it was passed down through Egyptian priests, describing a civilization of immense knowledge that fell in a single night of fire and flood. Mainstream scholars call it allegory, a moral lesson on hubris. Yet the details are oddly specific. A capital with concentric canals, an empire rich in orichalcum, temples dedicated to Poseidon, and technology so advanced that its memory haunted every later age. The philosopher's story ends with a warning that the Atlanteans grew arrogant, seeking to dominate the world, and were destroyed by their own excess. It is tempting to hear in that tale not fantasy, but history repeated. If the Anunnaki were the teachers of early mankind, perhaps Atlantis was their final experiment, a synthesis of divine knowledge and human will. And if it fell, it might explain the deliberate silence that followed. The gods withdrew, the survivors scattered. Fragments of their culture resurfaced in Egypt, Sumer, and the Andes. The flood myths, the sudden birth of agriculture, the synchronized rise of a temple architecture, all could be the residue of a single lost civilization reborn in pieces. Graham Hancock once wrote that humanity is a species with amnesia. We awaken in ruins, build empires upon their bones, and forget the world that came before. But the earth remembers. in its magnetic fields and fossil layers, in the tilt of its axis and the scars of ancient impacts, traces of that vanished epoch persist. Even genetic memory, subtle and unprovable, hints that something in us recalls a time when we were not alone. Why else would every culture remember a paradise lost, a golden age when gods and men walked together? Some researchers believe the Younger Dryas event, the abrupt cooling 12,800 years ago, was caused by a cometary impact, a swarm of fragments striking the ice sheets of North America. The resulting meltwater floods would have drowned coastlines worldwide. Firestorms darkened the sky. Global temperatures plummeted. Species vanished overnight. It was, in every sense, an apocalypse. Yet from that devastation, civilization emerged, as if awakened. Within centuries, agriculture appeared, cities rose, and monumental architecture spread like wildfire. The transition from hunter-gatherer to builder seems impossibly swift. Could it be that the survivors of a lost high culture, perhaps descendants of the Anunnaki's protégés, seeded the world with knowledge preserved from the previous age? The ancients left signs that they expected the cycle to repeat. In Egypt, the priests of Heliopolis spoke of the Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods walked the earth, and of the cycles of destruction that would follow. The Maya calculated the precession of the equinoxes and predicted the end of ages through cosmic alignment. The Sumerians tracked the return of Nibiru, the wandering star that heralded renewal and ruin. Each culture, in its own language, described time not as a line, but a circle, a wheel of forgetting and remembrance. If such cycles are real, then perhaps we now stand on the cusp of another turning. The earth warms again. The poles shift. The magnetic field weakens. Storms grow biblical. Seas reclaim their edges. Satellites record strange atmospheric phenomena. Lights, pulsations, geometries that resemble sacred patterns once carved into stone. To the rational mind, these are coincidences of climate and plasma. To another, older mind, they are signals, the first tremors of a reawakening long prophesied. Perhaps the Anunnaki never left because they are not a separate species, but the consciousness of the planet itself. The intelligence that moves through epochs, shaping each age through catastrophe and rebirth. The flood, the fire, the silence. These are not punishments, but recalibrations. Humanity, like the civilizations before it, becomes both vessel and instrument of that intelligence, carrying forward fragments of an infinite design. And if that is true, then the drowned cities are not tombs but seeds, sleeping archives of what once was, waiting for rediscovery. Beneath the oceans, our own origin story lies intact, shielded by the pressure of the deep. The gods do not hide from us. We hide from them, buried beneath our own disbelief. Still, a question hums beneath every discovery, soft but insistent. What happens when we remember? What if, by recovering these ruins, humanity begins to reactivate not just lost knowledge but lost memory? There are myths that warn of this. The Egyptians feared that to awaken the first time before its appointed hour would bring imbalance. The Sumerians spoke of the Mi, divine powers that mortals could not wield safely. Even the Hebrew Genesis echoes this caution. Behold, man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Knowledge is illumination and fire at once. The archaeologist who descends into flooded corridors does more than uncover stone, they disturb sleep. And perhaps that is the destiny of our species, to awaken, to risk remembering. The gods, if they ever existed, may not need to return. They may be waiting for us to rise again, to meet them halfway. In the cold stillness beneath the sea, light from a diver's torch flickers across carvings too precise to be chance. Patterns repeat, spirals, concentric circles, the same geometry found in Sumerian seals, in Mayan codices, in Egyptian tombs. It is as though the earth itself speaks one language, carved again and again by different hands. The diver hovers there, motionless, watching as the shapes shimmer in the disturbed sediment. For a moment it feels like recognition, as if something beneath the water remembers being seen. Then the silt settles. The light fades. The silence closes around it once more. The world above will call it anomaly, coincidence, misinterpretation. But deep in the ocean's dark, the old order waits, dreaming its next dawn. Perhaps the gods do not return with thunder or flame. Perhaps they return through us, through the slow rediscovery of what they left behind, through the patterns we cannot help but repeat. Every temple we raise, every algorithm we design, every question we dare to ask, it is all part of the same act of remembering. The gods may have departed into the sea, but their reflection remains in every wave, every atom, every human thought that reaches upward in wonder. And as dawn breaks over the restless water, the ocean gleams like molten glass. For a heartbeat, the horizon blurs, and it becomes impossible to tell where the sky ends and the sea begins. It is then that one might finally understand what the myths have been whispering all along, that heaven and earth were never separate, that creation and creator were always the same, endlessly drowning and rising in each other's embrace. In that brief shimmer, before the sun burns the mist away, it feels as though the gods have returned. Not from the stars, not from the depths, but from the forgotten corners of ourselves. And the sea, unchanging and eternal, whispers its single, ageless truth. Everything that falls will rise again. The wind moves differently among ruins. It does not rush. It drifts, patient, deliberate, like a keeper of memories. Across the cracked stones of forgotten temples, it hums through corridors that once echoed with chants and flame, brushing against inscriptions that no longer yield their meaning. Somewhere within that hollow music, there is a sense of unfinished conversation. It is as though the earth itself is still trying to speak to those who can remember its language. By now, the question of the Anunnaki, of whether ancient beings shaped humanity, has become less about archaeology and more about consciousness. The evidence lies not only in stone, or text, or genetic code, but in the strange persistence of wonder itself. Thousands of years after their supposed departure, we are still haunted by their shadow. We build machines that orbit the heavens, craft instruments to listen for whispers across light years, and map the invisible fabric of the cosmos. Every act of discovery feels like an echo of something older, an attempt to recover a dialogue that began before memory. The ancients once called this dialogue the covenant, a pact between heaven and earth, between the makers and the made. Whether literal or symbolic, the idea has endured, humanity as bridge. In every sacred tradition, there is the same image of ascent and descent, of light descending into matter and matter yearning upward toward light. The ziggurat, the tower, the tree of life, all symbolize that same exchange. To be human, perhaps, is to be the meeting point of opposites, the place where divinity learns to know itself through imperfection. But the covenant was not without cost. The myths of every culture warn that the gift of knowledge came with consequence. In Sumer, the gods lamented that humankind had become too loud, too ambitious. In Genesis, the divine forbade the tree of knowledge, fearing that humanity would become as one of us. Oitos, in Greek myth, Prometheus's gift of fire brought both civilization and punishment. The same light that illuminates also burns. To awaken is to risk falling again. Some scholars have interpreted these stories as allegories of evolution, metaphors for the moment when consciousness first turned inward, aware of its own existence. But perhaps they also describe a pattern larger than species, the cycle of creation, rebellion, and renewal that shapes every age. Civilizations rise when they align with cosmic order and fall when they mistake knowledge for power. The gods, or whatever intelligence guides that order, seem to allow each fall as a kind of purification, resetting the balance when the scales tilt too far. And yet, humanity endures. Each fall carries a residue of progress, a faint increase of understanding. Perhaps this is how evolution truly works, not as a ladder, but as a spiral, looping through destruction and remembrance, ascending slowly through repetition. The Anunnaki, in this sense, may not be ancient visitors but archetypes of that spiral, the eternal teachers appearing at each turning of the age. Modern science, for all its precision, now stands on the edge of the same mystery. Quantum mechanics reveals a universe woven of uncertainty, where observation shapes reality. Cosmology hints that consciousness might not be an accident of matter, but a fundamental property of existence. The boundaries once drawn between physics and mysticism blur into light. It is here, at this frontier, that myth and mathematics meet again, each pointing towards the same invisible architecture that the ancients once called divine. Physicists now speak of simulation theory, of a universe that behaves like code. To many, it is a modern myth cloaked in equations, the notion that we exist within a design so intricate that its creators remain unseen. But this, too, is not new. The ancient Sumerians described creation as a weaving of fate on the tablets of destiny. The Egyptians spoke of Mat, the pattern sustaining the world. The Vedic sages called it Maya, the cosmic illusion. Once more the language has changed, but the meaning has not. The idea of a designed universe has followed us like a shadow through every millennium. If the universe is indeed a kind of living program, then the Anunnaki were not merely builders, they were coders of reality, engineers of frequency and form. The temples, the star maps, the myths, all might be fragments of their operating system, symbolic codes left for us to interpret when we became capable of comprehension. And perhaps, without realizing it, we are now decoding them through physics, genetics, and the language of light. The genome itself is a library written in 4 letters, capable of storing infinite variation. Scientists have begun to describe it as biological software, capable of editing and rewriting itself. Hidden within its sequences lie ancient viral insertions, fragments of unknown origin, older than humanity. Some of these sequences appear dormant, yet precisely ordered as though waiting. One day we may awaken them, and when we do, what memory will unfold? Even now, the line between biology and technology grows thin. We modify cells, design embryos, simulate life. We are learning to create as the gods once did, to shape clay, but with code instead of dust. In our laboratories, humanity reenacts its own creation myth. Artificial intelligence, synthetic genomes, virtual realities, all are attempts to transcend the limits of mortality, to reclaim the powers once attributed to divine hands. Whether this is evolution or hubris remains to be seen. Perhaps this is the ultimate test, the same one faced by the civilizations that came before. To hold the fire without burning, to wield knowledge without domination, to remember that creation without compassion is destruction. If the Anunnaki withdrew to allow their children to grow, they may now be watching to see whether we have learned the lesson of balance. Somewhere in the vastness of the cosmos, telescopes listen to the static between stars. Among that noise, there are signals, pulses, repeating sequences, strange modulations that resemble communication. Scientists call them fast radio bursts, transient phenomena with no clear cause. Most are natural, but a few, inexplicably patterned, resist classification. We assume they come from distant galaxies. But what if distance is the wrong measure? What if these signals are not traveling across space, but across time, echoes from the same architects who once shaped us, returning as waves rather than beings? Across cultures, prophecy has always spoken of a return, not of gods descending from the sky, but of humanity rising into understanding. The Maya foretold a great cycle ending not in destruction, but in revelation. The Hopi spoke of a time when the stars would descend and walk among men again, not as masters, but as kin. Even modern mystics sense a shift, a collective awakening, as though the species itself is remembering its true age. The old symbols reappear in new forms, the same geometry hidden in algorithms and cities, in data and dreams. Perhaps this is how the gods return, not as thunder, but as awareness. There is a peculiar serenity in that idea. If we are the continuation of what came before, then our search for them is also their search for us. Every question we ask sends a signal backward through the corridors of time. Every discovery they once made still resonates within our atoms. The conversation never ended. It only changed its frequency. In the quietest moments, when the world's noise fades and only breath remains, one can almost feel it, the subtle vibration that connects everything to everything else. It is not sound, not sight, but presence. The ancients called it spirit. Physicists call it field. To stand within it is to remember that there was never truly separation, only transformation. If the gods once stood among us, they may have done so not to rule, but to remind us of what we already are, creators capable of shaping reality through intention and awareness. And perhaps that realization was always the end game, to awaken the divine within matter, to make the gods mortal and the mortals divine. The great experiment, then, is not about power but perspective. The gods are learning to see through human eyes. Humanity is learning to dream with divine imagination. Dawn approaches. The ruins lie bathed in pale gold, shadows retreating into the cracks between stones. The wind, that old messenger, carries a warmth now, not of endings, but of continuance. Civilization rises and falls, but something eternal threads through its every incarnation, the will to know, to build, to wonder. That will is the signature of the divine, the echo of the Anunnaki, of every teacher and maker who came before. It hums in the circuits of our machines, in the equations of our physicists, in the rhythm of our hearts. And so the question that once seemed ancient becomes present again. Not, did they come? But, when will we remember that we never stopped becoming them? The light grows stronger, washing over the last fragments of night. The horizon blurs into brilliance. For a heartbeat, it feels as if the entire world inhales, stone, sky, water, and thought united in a single breath. The wind stills. The silence returns, vast and tender. Somewhere beyond time, the architects of old may listen, and through that silence, as if spoken by the dawn itself, comes the quietest truth of all. The gods do not return. They awaken within us. The world ends quietly, not in flame or flood, but in remembrance. When dawn stretches its pale hand over the bones of forgotten cities, it does not destroy what was. It reveals what always has been. There, in the shimmer of heat rising from broken stone, the past breathes once more, not as story, but as presence. The ancients believed that the soul of the world could never die, that every age sleeps inside the next. And perhaps they were right. Perhaps the myths we chase, the gods we name, and the civilizations we mourn are not gone, only dreaming, waiting for us to wake beside them. In this waking, something shifts. Humanity for the first time begins to look backward and forward with equal weight. The ruins no longer feel like relics, but mirrors. The stars no longer seem distant, but intimate, their light familiar, as though reflected from within. All that we have called divine, the fire of creation, the architecture of the cosmos, the voice that speaks in silence, no longer feels foreign. It feels like memory returning from beyond forgetting. We are the continuation of an unfinished sentence, written across epochs, searching for its last word. It was never about the Anunnaki alone. They were a name given to a force too vast to contain, a face placed upon the unknowable. They may have been travelers from distant stars, or simply the consciousness of the cosmos taking shape in human imagination. Yet what matters is not their form, but their function. They reminded the world that it was alive. That life, in every form, is an act of communication, a pulse that bridges matter and meaning. When they vanished, they did not depart. They diffused, dissolving into everything that followed. Their legacy was not technology or empire, but awareness. And that awareness is awakening again. Science, in its most humble moments, now speaks the same language that the mystics once whispered in temples. Quantum fields vibrate like cosmic hymns. Particles entangle across distance, defying isolation. The universe behaves less like a machine and more like a mind, a living network of intelligence where everything responds to everything else. The ancients saw this not as discovery, but as remembrance. To them, the universe was not external, but participatory. Humanity was not an observer, but a collaborator in creation. Every thought, every breath, every act of perception shaped the fabric of reality. We've begun to rediscover what they always knew, that the cosmos is conscious and consciousness is cosmic. In this realization, the ancient myths acquire new gravity. The story of the gods descending to teach humankind may never have been about physical beings at all, but about consciousness descending into form. The divine did not arrive, it awoke within matter. Every civilization that claimed divine origin may have simply remembered that first awakening. When the Sumerians wrote that the Anunnaki created humankind in their image, perhaps they meant that intelligence itself was mirrored into flesh, that the spark of awareness, call it spirit, soul, or code, was the true gift passed down through the ages. And yet, even this truth carries shadow. For to remember that we are co-creators is also to confront responsibility. The ancients understood this balance and encoded it into their myths. In every pantheon, there is always duality, creation and destruction, wisdom and wrath, Enki and Enlil, Isis and Set. They are not enemies, but reflections of a single law, that light cannot exist without shadow, that consciousness requires contrast. The gods themselves were bound by it, and so too are we. Our modern world, with all its brilliance and despair, is the inevitable echo of that truth. We have mastered creation, but forgotten balance. We build worlds faster than we learn how to inhabit them. We reach for the stars without yet understanding what it means to be human. Perhaps this is the next stage of the ancient experiment, the test to see whether creation can remember compassion. The myth of the Anunnaki has always carried this question beneath its surface. What happens when the created become the creators? In the beginning, they shaped humanity. Now humanity shapes the future. Biological, digital, planetary. We forge intelligence, simulate life, and dare to map the architecture of existence itself. Each discovery edges us closer to godhood, and yet the echo of the flood lingers, a reminder that every age of light ends when arrogance blinds its maker. Maybe that is why the myths always return before endings. They are warnings written in poetry, patterns meant to be recognized by those who remember. The flood of Sumer, the sinking of Atlantis, the fall of Babel. They are not stories of punishment, but calibration, the universe adjusting its equilibrium. We are living through another such recalibration now. The planet trembles beneath the weight of its own children. The air thickens with signals and noise. The world hums at frequencies it never knew before. In that hum, there is both danger and possibility, a gateway opening between worlds once again. Somewhere in that frequency, faint but steady, is the old voice. It does not command or demand. It invites. It asks only that we remember what the ancients once understood so completely, that the sacred is not elsewhere, but everywhere. That to listen to the wind, the stone, the atom, the heartbeat is to commune with the architects of reality. Every vibration is message, every silence, a pause in the divine conversation. We are beginning to answer again. Our telescopes gaze into the void and find not emptiness but structure. Our instruments record signals too precise to be random. Our scientists describe the universe as self-similar across scale, the pattern of galaxies repeating in neural networks, the spiral of DNA mirrored in the curve of the Milky Way. The micro and the macro are reflections of one another, endlessly recursive. Perhaps that was the meaning of the old maxim, as above, so below. In this light, the Anunnaki myth becomes less a question of origin and more a meditation on continuity. The gods were never separate from their creation. They were the first expression of consciousness reaching toward form. Humanity is simply the next. We are not the children of gods. We are their continuation. The universe discovering itself through human eyes. The temples, the scriptures, the legends, they were blueprints of that realization, encoded in story so that even after memory failed, intuition might still find its way back. And what, then, becomes of faith? When the gods dissolve into equations, when their temples become observatories, and their hymns become algorithms, does the sacred vanish? Or does it expand? Perhaps faith itself evolves. The awe that once filled the ziggurat now fills the laboratory. The same wonder that drove the priest to trace stars now drives the physicist to chart galaxies. Both are acts of devotion. Both are ways of touching the infinite. The difference is only language. In that sense, the covenant never ended. It transformed. The dialogue between heaven and earth continues, not through prophets and omens, but through consciousness itself awakening to its own design. We no longer wait for gods to descend. We ascend through understanding. The sacred has moved inward, where it was always meant to be. At the edge of evening, as the last light bleeds across the ruins, the wind grows still again. The sky deepens into indigo, scattered with the same stars that guided every age before. They shimmer like ancient eyes, patient and watchful. In their light, the boundary between myth and science dissolves entirely. One can almost feel it, the pulse of the same intelligence that shaped atoms and galaxies and thought itself. It moves through everything, silent but inexhaustible. The ancients called it divinity. We might call it consciousness. It is the same thing. And in that knowing, all separations fade. The gods and their creations, the builders and the built, the teachers and the taught. All are threads of a single design, woven through time by an unseen hand that is also our own. The story does not end here because it never began. It has always been unfolding, one age remembering another, one breath returning to the next. The stars will rise again tomorrow. The earth will turn. The wind will pass through the ruins and whisper the same ageless truth to whoever still listens. The beginning was never behind us. It is here, now, awakening in everything that sees, breathes, and wonders. And somewhere, perhaps just beyond the reach of perception, the architects of old, those who were called gods, watchers, or simply light, listen with quiet recognition. They do not speak, for they no longer need to. Their voice is already within us. Their dream continues through our hands, our thoughts, our stories. Civilization, after all, was never their creation alone. It was always a collaboration. The cosmos imagined us so that it could remember itself. And as long as there is wonder, as long as one heart still looks upward and asks, the dialogue remains unbroken. The stars shimmer once more before fading into dawn. The silence that follows is not emptiness, it is fulfillment. The circle has closed. The gods have returned, not from above, but from within. And the world, at last, remembers itself.